Yeah, we're recording. Should be okay.
Looks
So,
like it.
yeah, hi, Erin Beaty. Thank you so much for coming into the Literature Podcast. I'm so glad that I can have you here and have the chance to have an interview with you. Because you're the author of Blood and Moonlight, which was my best reading of 2023, and so yeah, I'm really excited about this interview. Um,
Well,
can
thanks for
you?
having me. I'm
Yeah.
always glad to meet readers
Oh,
and
that's so
writers.
nice. Can you introduce yourself like as an author and as a person? Because you worked in the US Army, if I'm not wrong, but I think that you're
Navy,
not
but
working there anymore. Yeah.
mm,
So, yeah, can you introduce
yeah.
yourself for the people who may not know you in the audience?
I was raised in the middle of the country in Indiana, and I joined the Navy out of college. Well, I went to a special college that trained naval officers. And I was in the Navy for a few years, and then I got out and I had a family, and then they kept me busy. And then when I had some free time, finally, because they were all in school, I found myself starting to write stories, and I became an author. So
Okay.
that's the simple version.
Okay, that's fine. That's completely fine. So what is your, because I often want to understand where you got the idea of writing, so like some people wake up in the morning and just like I'm gonna write a book, and some people it was in their childhood or something. What is your very first memory of writing? When did you start writing?
Well, in school, I always wanted to be good at everything.
Yeah.
So, but I liked math and science. So but I thought that English and writing were very important. So I did those things and I read a lot, but I was not really much of a writer. I was a better writer than most people I went to college with because engineers are
Yeah.
terrible, terrible writers. And they always wanted me to do the lab reports because I was the only one in the group who could write. Um, and people all my life people have come to me to edit their to read over their papers or their stories or their fitness reports or a lot of things, and then I don't know why one day it was kind of I woke up and say, hey, this is I always had story ideas, but I thought about them and then they were always just my private things to think about when I was bored,
Yeah,
because I come
daydreaming.
from a time before cell phones.
Yeah.
So I
Ooh.
would drive with my family for hours. I would sit on a Navy ship for hours with nothing to do but look at the water. So I had stories. And then one day I had one, um, and I think it was 2014. And I thought, well,
Okay.
maybe I could actually make this into a book. So I started to write it. And that was my
Yeah.
first book.
Okay, so the Trader's Kiss. Okay, I haven't
Hmm.
read. I have to admit, I haven't read the Trader's Kiss. I have it in my shelves at
No,
home.
it's okay.
But I started like I read it the first time with Blood and Moonlight. Um, so the first novel you wrote was the
Hmm.
Trader's Kiss. Was your first try?
Yep. First
Oh
try.
wow, that's impressive. And how old were you when you started writing it?
Was it
Do you
like
remember?
36, 37?
Okay.
So, well, actually, I had a blog for a while, but it wasn't like a blog for the world. It was a blog for my family because my husband is still in the Navy, so we move a lot, and we're far away from our family. So all of our parents always wanted to know what was happening with the kids. So I would write about the stories of things that were happening with the kids, and I think that actually prepared me a lot. I didn't even realize it because it made me tell a story quickly and find the funny part of it. Um, to go and they're fun to go back and remember because I don't remember half those things happening. And oh.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
so
can't see
nice.
that blog. I took it off once I
You
became an
were
author because I was
published.
like, no, no,
Yeah.
my family doesn't need everyone to know the dumb things they said when they were 6.
Yeah, probably not, indeed. And um, how long how long did it take to you to write that book? Like the Trader's Kiss.
Um, so the first draft took about six
Yeah, I
weeks,
mean, first draft and everything,
but
like between the first word on the page and then the published book it
Oh,
became?
so I it took me about a year before
Okay.
it was good enough to get a literary agent. And
Okay.
then 9 months after that, we got a publisher, and then um, 2 years after that. So it was almost 3 years exactly to the day between starting to write it and being published in the US.
Okay.
That's very fast.
Yeah, especially for the US, because I think that in France we don't have that literary agent you have. We
Mhm.
just like it's the author with publishing house, and there's nothing in between. So probably quicker. Um, did you like how? I mean, I've tried to write probably I'm at my fourth book, I think, and I still have huge difficulties. How did you manage to write an entire book? Did you have any method, or did you follow, I don't know, writing advice, or is there anything you that made you write
So
quicker or
every book
better? I
is
don't know.
different.
Yeah.
Every book is different. The first book, it was so much fun because I had no idea what I was doing, and I had no idea how hard it was going to be, and how stressful it was going to become once I had a publisher, and then they wanted to edit it, and all of a sudden I had somebody that was paying me money to make this, and I didn't want to make them disappointed because they were spending money on it, and so it became very stressful that way. If I had known how hard it was, I might have chickened out
Yeah.
and never done it. But then and then but then I had signed on for two more books. So, but the next one was very hard in a different way. The third
Okay.
one was probably the easiest. Well, compared to the first, the third one's the easiest, I guess, because I felt like I knew what I was doing. But then with Blood and Moonlight,
You
it was like
start all
starting
over
all
again.
over. It was
Yeah.
so hard. And there was a lot of other things going on. There was COVID, and I got switched to a different publishing house and so I got a new editor. My small publishing section was cut, and they put me with another house. So I was
Okay.
with a new house that didn't pick me. I was given to them. So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, do they even want me around? Are they just waiting for me to finish this and be gone?
Oh.
So
Yeah,
it
I see.
was it got very and they were sold those two books were sold on just one idea that wasn't very fleshed out.
Yeah.
So I had to build it all from scratch. And then there's COVID.
Yeah.
And then I was moving all the time. So I I don't know I mean, I have different methods of going back and forth with it, but a lot of times it involves crying and chocolate,
I see.
but a lot of
I see.
caffeine.
Yeah. So you're more of a coffee person than a tea person?
I'm both.
Both.
I
Okay.
I'm not going to pick a side on that because I love coffee and I love tea.
Okay. And so would you mind picking a side on gardener or architect? Is that something you have in the US, like gardener
Yeah,
type
yeah.
or architect, yeah, type in
We
writing?
say we say plotter or
Plotter? Okay.
pantser.
Okay.
And pantser is someone is it's an expression to, fly or ride by the seat of your pants, just like just going without even paying attention to where you're going. Um, so kind of the same, it's the same concept, but so I always take what I call the middle road because I there's a little bit of both. Do you play croquet? Do
No,
you know
I
how to
don't.
play croquet?
Yeah,
Okay,
no, sorry.
so this my favorite analogy is because in croquet you have all these little hoops set around
Yeah.
the field, and you have to put the ball through each hoop in order. So when I go into writing a story, it's like I know the big parts,
Yeah.
all the hoops, and I know how I have to get through them. But to get through them, I sometimes take a crazy path and go around, and sometimes I get knocked off to the side, and sometimes I have to
Mm.
start all over to get back lined up with what I want. So I say I play croquet.
Oh, okay. That's okay. That works fine. I
It's a
get the
little bit of
analogy.
both.
Yeah. And what is your favorite step? Like, what is your favorite phase of writing? Outlining, first draft, editing. Do you have any
Editing.
preference or editing?
Absolutely editing because drafting I hate.
Okay.
because
I'm not the only
I
one
have
then.
to do it right.
Yeah.
I have to do it right. And a lot of people say, just write it and fix it later. And like, no, that doesn't work for me. If it's
Yeah.
not right, then it stops working.
Yeah, I get that.
So my
I
first
get
draft is actually usually very close to the last draft.
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I have another question about like
Mhm.
writing in general, and then after I want to go to Blood and Moonlight because obviously there's some things I want to know. What's the best piece of advice writing advice you were given and you apply today?
I don't know if anybody has ever given me advice because I started doing it without asking anybody.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
I have heard
that works.
uh, Scott Westerfeld always says, finish what you start. Because for most people, you have to write several books before you write the one that's good enough to be published. And so he says, you don't want to stop all the time. So by the time you get the really good idea, you know how to write a beginning because you've written 20 beginnings and you're okay at middles because you've written 10 middles, but you've never finished a book. So we're really bad at writing ends. So you end up, you've always, we've all read the book that was started really good and then was kind of okay in the middle. And then the end, you're like, they messed that
Mhm.
up. So you have to practice writing ends. So finish it, even if it hurts, and it does.
Okay, thanks. That's a pretty good advice, I think. So now about Blood and Moonlight, because the second volume of the series just came out in France.
Hmm.
We had to wait so long for it to be out in France because I think we waited like a year or something. I don't know.
The
But I was
Americans
like,
waited longer.
yeah. I mean, I was seeing it in the English version. I was like, should I read it in English or no? I'll wait for the French version because I want to take what's I understand better when it's
Mhm.
in French, obviously, and yeah, it's easier for me. So, um, Blood and Moonlight. I'll give a little context about the story and what it tells, like
Mhm.
global synopsis. So we plunge into a universe that seems inspired by medieval Europe in a society divided between the Hadrians, the worshippers of the sun, and on the one hand, and the Selene. How do you pronounce it? Selene?
Celine.
Selene. Okay. Because we have like Latin words, they pronounce different
Hmm.
depending on the accent. The people of the night, on the other. We meet Catherine, an apprentice to an architect who builds sanctums, a kind of cathedral dedicated to the sun, who witnesses a murder. Gradually, she becomes aware of abilities she discovered to be linked to the light of the moon and meets Simon, a young man who leads the investigation to discover who is the serial killer, who is rampaging. Sorry, I wrote words I don't even know how to pronounce through Calais, so the city you invented.
Hmm.
Have I summed it up correctly? Is that
Yep,
all right?
that's it,
Yeah.
basically.
How did you come up with this idea? Like, where did it start? Because I often describe my own ideation process as a thread that appears
Hmm.
some like one day you just have something that appears and you have to unwind the whole spool. Is it
Yep.
like that for you, or like I mean, what was the first idea?
Usually,
Okay.
usually that's how it goes. And that one, it was, we lived in New Orleans at the time in Louisiana. And I went out for a walk early one morning because it's so hot that you can only go out in the early morning or in the evening. And I was walking along the river and it was very foggy. And across the river, you could see one of the big cathedrals coming out of the fog, just like sitting over top of it. And they had a big crane on the side of it. They were doing some repair work or restoration. And it wasn't, I don't think it was as big as like a medieval cathedral, but it was pretty big. And I remember looking at that. And I've always been fascinated by medieval European cathedrals just because they took so long and they're so beautiful and they're still standing. And
The ones that didn't burn.
I
But
know,
yeah.
and that happened. That happened while I was writing the story, and I
Oh wow.
cried. I
I
was
cried
at
as
the
well.
store and I was crying, and the lady
Yeah,
was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, Notre Dame's
yeah,
on fire." Notre
yeah.
Dame, I should say better.
I was in a
Um,
holiday, like I was in Africa, and I just saw that on the TV. I was like, I think that most of French people were like, oh my God, like our French identity was so badly hurt when it
well,
burned.
I remember thinking, man, nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be. I was like, not in my lifetime. It has to. I don't want it to go away in my life. Anyway, so I saw this and the construction crane, and I thought, what? And I started thinking about Notre Dame and all the other cathedrals, and I was like, wow, they didn't even have those giant cranes, and yet they built bigger, more magnificent cathedrals than that. I was like, man, so they would have. I'm an engineer from in college, and so I started thinking about all the things they had to build around it to support it, the scaffolds, and and I was like, man, those scaffolds had to be just as sturdy as the building itself. And I mean, there had to have been accidents from the scaffolding. I bet they had to take care of it as much as the cathedral. And I said, so they probably had inspectors. And I was like, well, what if they have to climb around that like a monkey? And these are just I don't even know why these things just keep unrolling in my head. And it's like, someone have to climb around like a monkey. And I was like, well, what if somebody was up really high? They could see over the whole city because it's higher than everything. And what if they saw a crime? I was like, oh, like a murder. Maybe it was at night. I have to come up with a reason for someone to be up there at night. But they saw a murder at night, and then they try to tell somebody, and nobody believes them, or maybe somebody does believe them, but so it kind of went from there. And originally, the idea was had no magic; it was entirely historical.
Okay.
So when I did all the research, it probably came out in the novel, but that it was very historical. But when I said the idea to my publisher, they said, "Oh, that's great, but you should put some magic in it." And I was like, "Oh, I don't even know how to do that." But so it's like just change the names of everything, make it
Yeah.
slightly different. Um, so that's so everything just got adjusted, but it made things a little bit more flexible
Yeah.
because when
Yeah,
things
obviously.
didn't work, I could tweak them a little. I didn't have to make it fit into the historical box. Um,
Yeah.
so it made some things easier, but then it meant I had to make a whole lot of other things up. But I based it
Okay.
on the city of Lyon. So I'm saying that right?
Nantes.
Laon, Lyon,
L. Sorry, can you
L
repeat?
A O Laon, Lyon in France.
Never heard of it.
Uh,
But yeah,
it's a city with the cathedral,
yeah.
and that was where I was going to put it. And so, but that's where it is. So I
Okay.
used maps of the city to build everything.
Oh, that's really interesting because when I was reading it, I was like, oh my God, this is happening in France because it's so rare that books, and especially like even French authors often write stories that happen in the USA, and it's rare to have like non, cliche like Emily in Paris stories to have
Hmm.
something that is. The only one I can think about is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, written by V.
Hmm.
Schwab, which happens in Le Mans. So it's not kind of in the same area of France, but is sales. And I
Right.
was like, oh my God, this is my country. I was like so proud, and so I was trying to see all the references you've hidden in the text, and yeah, that was really really great. So were the like historical research manageable, or did you struggle with that, or was it easy? Was it like long? I don't know.
Well, I really enjoyed it, and I spent a lot of time setting it up. So I was actually it was a little bit sad when they said take almost everything out that was historical, um, because I had managed to fit so many things together in the time and the place. So it was a little bit sad, but I loved it. I found all these beautiful pictures. Um, a lot of them were from Notre Dame because in Paris because that's the one that's so photographed. But I got pictures of the insides and the bell towers and all the the ceilings and everything. So
Yeah, it's
just use that.
really, yeah, really beautiful. So about, because you said that you were like connecting dots together in the story,
Hmm.
but did you plan everything in advance for that story, like including the killer's true identity, or did you just went with the flow?
I think I knew who it was from the beginning, but I didn't know very much about him. So I had to create, as I wrote, I had to put in the things that made him
Yeah,
either that subtly laid the clues that it was this person or it could be this person. But then at the same time, every time I would try to present something that made it like look like, oh, maybe it's him, that I would immediately try to distract with a bigger clue that seemed to point to someone else at the same time.
yeah,
Um, that was my strategy on hiding
yeah,
who it was. But yeah, I did
yeah.
know.
Yeah, you didn't know. I had an intuition, but every time I was like, "Oh, it's probably not him." And then I thought, "Yeah, that's him." And no, probably
Oh
then
no,
not. It's probably. And I was like,
it makes more
and
sense to be someone else.
yeah, yeah, until the very end of the novel, and at the very end, I was like, "Ah, I was right." But yeah, it's because there's clues and foreshadowing, and if you want to guess who the killer is, you can always guess. But the magic of it is like we know, but we still want to read it because we are not sure. And so yeah,
Hmm.
that's really really great and really well done. Um, in the in the I read so Silence and Shadows a few. I finished it a few days ago,
Hmm.
and I the part I always enjoy reading is, I said, you said the acknowledgements, where you
Oh,
thank
hmm.
people for the people who helped you writing the book and everything. And that there was one sentence that just caught my attention. You wrote out, this is the French, like English translation from French,
Hmm.
so probably not exactly what you said, but if I translate like word to word, is this novel is the most difficult I've ever written. It made me doubt myself and everything I thought I knew about writing. Uh, that sentence made me cry, really. Like I was
Oh,
like, this book is so good. How like I enjoyed it so much. I was like, okay,
oh,
the
thank you.
author struggled to to make it out in the world, and I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. And so what can you talk about these difficulties in writing, or is that, and what did you face writing this book? Why
Um,
was it so difficult?
sometimes, sometimes it's like trying to like pack a bunch of things into a suitcase so they fit just right. And everything has to be folded and put in the right place. And sometimes things just aren't fitting. But then, okay, well, I'm going to take this out. So I put this in, and then I have to rearrange everything, and it just gets so frustrating. I know I say that I like the editing, but my problem is that I kind of don't know the end until I know the end, but I don't know the details of the end until I get there. So often the last 20% of the book gets written kind of at the very, very end. Once everything is perfectly set up, then the end comes. But when everything is not perfectly set up, the end just like gets stuck. And I, this is a true story. I called my editor and I said, I need to talk to you. And we got on a video chat and I started crying and I said,
Oh.
I don't want to do this anymore. I will give you all the money back. I hate this so much. And he was so nice. He
Oh.
talked me through it and it got okay, but it was, I don't know. It's the other analogy I like to use. I use a lot of analogies. Is it's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle in the middle of a tornado, and
Yeah.
all the pieces are flying around, and you have to catch them and put them in the right place and hold everything down and then get the next piece. And sometimes you let go and things start to fly away, and that's what it feels like. And I think there's always a point in the book where I start crying and I start hitting my head on the wall, literally. And um but then it finally come I don't even know what happens after that. Somehow I get through it and I wake up on the other side and it's done. I don't mean that I like black out or anything, but
Someone else wrote the end of the book.
it's not quite like that. But it is a matter of sometimes I read things and I think, wow, when did I write that? I don't even remember writing that. That's
Yeah.
okay. It's not bad.
Okay. That's really interesting because I think when we start writing, when we start, yeah, being published or anything, we have so much doubts because we haven't done it before, and it's the
Hmm.
first time. This is my first time editing a novel because I had never finished a novel before, and so sometimes I'm like, should I just give up? Should I just like bury this this book and just forget about it and then do something else? And seeing that published author of books I love have the same feelings is kind of
Well, when you can take a break from it, and
yeah.
that can help a lot. But when you're on a publishing schedule, you can't take a break anymore. It's like it has to be done. It has to be done next week. And they're waiting and you keep telling them it's coming and then but that's at least with me. So
Yeah.
I'm always surprised when they say, "Okay, now what do you want to write?" I'm like, "You still want to work with me? Oh my gosh. I'm terrible."
No, you're not. What
What to
like
work with.
how do you overcome that these difficulties of the writing the end of so it was the end of you didn't have that problem with Blood and Moonlight, just with Silence and Shadows?
Um I had it more with Silence and Shadow than I did with Blood and Moonlight, although um it just took a whole lot of like the last scene took a whole lot of like trying to get the exact words right because in a book like that there's like you don't want it to be like this the villain gives a big long speech about why they did everything. um First of all, you want to have a little bit more than just talk, and then second of all, you have to make it real. You have to make it interesting. That was my problem with that, was like making it not sound cheesy was or silly is what it's that was my hardest part with that. And then um with Blood and Moonlight, it was that was more like trying to pack everything into a suitcase and not knowing what exactly needed to go in it and where. I kept trying to make people do things and be like, oh, they can't do that yet. So
I get that. So you just took a break from your manuscript, or how do you solve the problem of not like be able to get to the end?
I would say take a break if you can and do something that takes your mind off of it. I like doing puzzles because I can think about things while I'm working on something in my hand, or I do a sewing project or something. I don't think reading another book might be helpful or might not be helpful. Um, Sometimes reading while I'm trying to write doesn't work because then I get distracted. It helps to sit and listen to music. It helps to go on walks. Um, I get a lot of good ideas to fix things when I'm in the shower.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of people
And
have that. I think it's because it's one of the only moment we don't have anything to do apart
yep.
from yeah, it's all we've done it so many times. It's just we're a robot, so
Hmm.
the mind
Your
sets to
brain is free.
yeah.
It's not distracted. So
So take long showers
take a long shower and a nap.
and a nap. Okay. So we're getting to the end of the interview. I still have three extra
Oh yeah.
questions. The first one is, are you working on a new novel at the moment? And if so, what can you tell us about it?
Um, so I am, but I'm not. Um, uh, I'm working with the publisher on what to do next. I'm waiting to hear back from them on what they want to do and how they want to do it. So, and in the meantime, I'm thinking about this book. They probably hope that I'm writing more than thinking, but I'm mostly thinking right now because there's some problems in it that I don't know how to solve yet. And they're in the beginning, so it has to be right. It has to be fixed and set up. But I'm also doing, I went back to do some college classes um,
Oh, right.
for for unrelated things. All my kids are older now, and I was like, oh man, I should go do something else. So I have to go back and review some things. So that's keeping me busy right now. So
Okay.
I'm working on something. I don't have an official project. I have lots of ideas and things, but I'm kind of taking a small break, but also getting ready. I'm ready to go when they say, okay,
Yeah.
now write this.
You're preparing.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I have two questions left. The first one is, what three pieces of advice would you give to young authors? I ask that often, and everyone
Yeah,
struggles
oh
with
yeah.
that question. But if we like, yeah, if you could give two or three advices.
So I always say write what you want to read, because if you really enjoy it, then that's going to make it more interesting. Um, Practice telling short stories, writing little. I think those the blog that I had was very helpful looking back on it. So like practice writing short stories about things that happened, at school today, or something you saw, because then you learn what kind of information you need to put into that scene and that story so that somebody who doesn't know anything about the people in it can understand. And it makes you say things in a short amount of time, in a short amount of words. So I think that's actually very helpful. But I would mostly say one of the things you have to do is you have to get out and you have to live life. You have to do things. Um, you have to experience what it's like to hike for 50 kilometers. You have to experience what it's like to ride a horse or to shoot an arrow from a bow, to know what it's like to be really hungry or really thirsty or really tired or super energized. I mean, do things that give you experiences that you can draw from, and study the things that you like. Um, you end up with all sorts of strange things. The magic system in Blood and Moonlight and Silence and Shadow is very science based. I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
is.
So there's weird things like conductivity and magnetism and light refraction and reflection and things, um that it just that's the stuff that I know and I think are interesting, and it just finds its way into it, and then it makes it more interesting and it gives it stability. But and then for the Traders series, like I do know what it's like to hike all day. I do know what it's like to ride a horse all day. I do know what it's like to get punched in the face. So if you know those things, then you have more to build your stories from, even
Yeah,
in just
being
the
in
tiniest
the
ways.
army is probably helping to to
Yeah,
know more
well,
things about, yeah, fighting and
I
everything.
know what it's like to be seasick. I know what it's like to be, to watch the sunrise over the ocean. But
Yeah,
if you sit in your room and write all the time, you don't know what colors it is.
that's so true. Thank you. So my last question is, so it's difficult when it's an English person I'm talking to, but um, the name of the podcast is Littérature, which means
Hmm.
read, tea, and scratch, kind of. And so
Hmm.
it's play on word with the word literature. What does
Cool.
literature mean to you? I'm sorry, that's the
Well, I
question
mean,
everyone
it's
hates.
an English word. No, it's okay. I mean, it's an English word too that just
Yeah.
means it's just the catalog of stories that um to tell. It's the stories of human history and all the things that matter to us. I like that I don't know if you ever heard that they say that fiction is actually more true than real life. If you've ever heard that, it's because we make our stories out of all the tiny bricks of truth that we have. And so everything in it is built out of true things. but there's a lot of things in our lives that are false, but our stories are made from everything that's true. So literature is in essence the truth of humanity.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's a very beautiful answer.
Oh, cool. I just came up with it too. So,
Yeah. That's why I never tell people about it, because I want something spontaneous and something that's from the heart.
oh,
So, yeah. Thank you
cool.
so much for your time and the interview. I hope you've had a good time, and
Well, yeah.
yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much for having me.
I'm gonna stop the recording.